Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, and thank you very much, Yael, for your thoughtful questions. Can everybody hear me? Is everything working okay? Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna start with the first question. Yael, thank you again for your comments. To what extent is halakha top-down, and how does it relate to the culture? And actually, I'm going to, if it's okay, well, I think as part of this question, you said, and to what extent does this impact orthodoxy? So, interestingly enough, this past week, I just went to a book launch by Zev Elef, who is a young historian of American Judaism, a protege of Jonathan Sarna. He's recently published a book, Who Rules the Synagogue, and he also has just published a reader on modern orthodoxy. So the program on Sunday was a panel of modern Orthodox rabbis here in Chicago. And so that panel and that program was very apropos of the response that I think I would give to this question. Halakha, of course, is top-down, in terms of its sources, in terms of its origins, and I think clearly you can't deny that is the belief of the Jewish system. Whether individual Jews believe that is really a separate question. But if you're looking at the tradition, clearly it's top-down in terms of origin. However, and this is a big however, even Orthodox scholars. Menachem alone, for one, and many, many others believe that the implementation of the halakha is here on earth. And so it's inevitable that halakha is a humanly based system, notwithstanding that. And how does it relate to culture? I don't believe you can separate, as you noted, Yael, the law and the culture. They are inevitably intertwined. That impacts, I think, your last question about the normative orders, because you really can't take culture and say it's a completely separate institution from the halakha. And by the way, Neil, I can't see you. I know you're there. Hi, Neil. I feel like I've been spending the summer with Neil Netanel because I've been reading your book. I'm writing some book reviews on it. And Neil's book is a perfect example of that very point. He goes through the halakha of Jewish law, as Jewish law or unfair competition in its origins, right? And he shows in every single chapter that the law, as the rabbis are utilizing it and implementing it, is shaped by their surrounding cultures, both the Jewish cultures in which the Jews are living, as well as the cultures of the communities in which they're living. As for the question about religion, I think that's a really good question. And the way that I would like to maybe reframe that question is what is the role of tradition, Jewish tradition, as opposed to halakha? And that's something that was constantly in my thought process as I was writing this book. It's still in my thought process in terms of the sequel. I think what I'd sort of like to float out on that topic very, very briefly is this. If you're talking about a large segment of the Orthodox community, maybe not the entire Orthodox community, but certainly a large segment, clearly they believe in living within the halachic system and following halakha. And that is binding and that is mandated. And that is not a way that the majority of non-Orthodox Jews, at least here in the States, think. They don't approach halakha that way. But many of these Jews do gravitate toward and appreciate and love Jewish tradition. So I think that when I was writing this book, and as I'm thinking about the sequel to this book, which will be more prescriptive, I think that's a very important distinction. Halakha as a rule-bound system of binding obligations simply does not resonate with how the majority of non-Orthodox Jews think. And so therefore that also relates to your third question, which is my critique. Why did I not critique the Orthodox? In point of fact, and by the way, people who have read this book and commented on it who are Orthodox think I should have made a critique of the Orthodox. They need to understand that the law is not dropping down from heaven and it's humanly implemented and influenced by culture. I agree with that. But this book was really written with a different theme and a goal in mind, and that is to show all of these quote-unquote cultural Jews that they're really not simply cultural Jews. They are influenced and shaped more by Jewish tradition, if you will, okay, than they might think that they are. And I think that this concept has tremendous implications as we think about as we think about how Judaism is going to play out in the 21st century, certainly in the United States, but even in Israel, where we know what the numbers are, where we know where the trends are going. The Pew Report tells us this. But I think if we kind of look at tradition and reclaiming tradition and how to reclaim tradition in a way that is marketable, if you will, to those who don't think in terms of binding obligation, I think we'll be perhaps more successful in terms of reclaiming that tradition. So thank you.
Thank you.